God bless you guys. This is Luis Reyes. Today I'm here with once again with Dr. Edward Dalcour, and today we're going to review a debate that you had not too long ago over here in California, which was very interesting. It was a debate where Dr. Dalcour debated oneness apologist Steve Ritchie. Dios les bendiga. Este día voy a estar aquí entrevistando nuevamente al Dr. Edward Dalcour. Y en este día vamos a hablar vamos a hacer un resumen del debate que él tuvo aquí en California hace un mes con un apologista unicitario que se llama Steve Ritchie. God bless you, brother. How are you?
Hey, I'm great. Excited to be here and excited to discuss this very important subject matter.
Amen. Dice que está mucho placer estar aquí con nosotros para hablar de este resumen que vamos a hacer del debate que él tuvo hace un tiempo. Wow. So, that debate that you had here, that was a really interesting debate. That when you debated Steve Ritchie, ese debate que tuviste con el apologista Steve Ritchie era un debate muy interesante. What are your thoughts on that debate? ¿Qué piensas tú de ese debate?
Well, I'll say at the onset, when we debated, I was not prepared for how much lack of knowledge he had, particularly on the original text and particularly on grammatical issues. And I learned that midstream in the debate that he really has no coherent knowledge of Greek, no coherent knowledge of languages, which is fine because I would say the English or any recognized translation does a good job.
Yeah. Dice que una cosa que se le hizo interesante es que estaba un poco sorprendido de la falta de conocimiento de los idiomas griego de su oponente apologista unicitario Steve Ritchie.
And in one thing I was not prepared. Well, actually, I suspected this would happen. Steve Ritchie is notoriously known for not staying on topic.
Dice que él conoce una cosa que no lo sorprende es que su oponente Steve Ritchie es bien conocido por una persona que no se queda con el tema. But that seems to be very common with most oneness people. I mean, I've even seen Trinitarians do that too. But it's very common with oneness people, correct?
Correct. And if I was a oneness and I was encountering arguments against my position that were not only had scholarly support, but had grammatical support from the text, had support in the context, I'd probably do the same thing.
Yeah. Dice que si él fuera una persona así que no tuviera apoyo del contexto y con apoyo con los eruditos, entonces posiblemente se entiende por qué una persona le gusta saltar mucho del contexto. Wow. So can you give me any examples of or?
Well, if you recall the opening statement, now the thesis of the debate was, did the person of the Son pre-exist?
Dice que el tema del debate era, ¿preexistía la persona del Hijo de Dios?
And in his opening statement, we heard virtually nothing on some of the most important, significant texts in the New Testament that shows the Son, the distinct person of the Son, pre-existed with the Father. We didn't hear anything in his opening statement.
No, dice él que no vimos nada en su punto de cuando abrió los comentarios que trató con esos textos que son los más importantes que tratan con la preexistencia del Hijo de Dios.
And what we did hear is unrelated issues. For instance, he kept reverting back to the Old Testament, saying, well, God is called Father, Isaiah 9:6 and Malachi 2:10, and he spent a lot of time talking about the places that God is called Father.
Yeah. Dice él que lo que sí recuerda es que miró que siempre se iba para el Antiguo Testamento para darnos textos donde se menciona que Dios es el Padre, que por ejemplo en Isaías 9:6 y Malaquías 3:10, I think it's Malachi 3:10, donde se le llama Padre, y pero es 2:10, y es lo que miró mucho.
And anyone who understands just the basics of titles in the Old Testament understands that the word Father was a reoccurring title that was not normative in the Old Testament. In fact, it's only used 15 times. And when it's used of God, it's denoting his role as creator or his parental role. The Old Testament Jews would not have a conception of father and son relationship as does the New Testament.
Dice que las personas que han estudiado este asunto saben que el término padre se usaba de una manera como de creador, like it was used to signify a creator, correct?
Yeah, creator or his parental role. Normally creator, like Malachi 2:10, and then we look at places like Isaiah 63:16 and 64:8. It shows his role as the potter, the creator, or his parental role and father in that sense, and not the person of the father.
Dice que demuestra mucho el carácter paternal y su carácter también, papel como creador. Y es como se usaba mucho el término, pero él citaba mucho esos textos. I also noticed that he would jump from verse to verse to verse to verse, and he presupposed the interpretation of all those other verses instead of proving them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, he would go to a passage and presuppose without actually dealing with what the passage actually indicates.
Y le dije que también miré que brincaba de pasaje a pasaje y presuponía la interpretación de cada pasaje sin probar la interpretación de ese pasaje.
And one of the, I think, most glaring red herrings that he presented was the fact was when he actually, now again, this debate was on the preexistence of the Son. He went so off topic and he started talking about the signers of the Nicene Creed were all oneness. He just, I mean, out of the blue. And it left the audience scratching their head. Yeah, like, what in the world is he, what does that have to do with anything?
Yeah, why are we talking about that?
You know?
Dice, él está señalando un ejemplo donde, por ejemplo, habló del credo de Nicea, que quién los firmó, que las personas que lo firmaron que eran unicitarios y cosas así. Y es muy común que vemos esto cuando hablamos con los unicitarios, que saltan por donde quiera y no se pueden quedar con el tema y brincan por donde quiera y presuponen todo lo que están diciendo.
And although throughout the debate, oh, by the way, the majority of the Nicene signers were not oneness, but it's so irrelevant. Say that they were. So what? Jerome said the whole world was Arian, you know, after the Council of Nicaea. What does that have to do with anything, especially our topic of the debate?
Está explicando que dice que, para corregirlo, que los que firmaron el credo de Nicea no eran unicitarios. Esa es una absurdidad, y que muchas personas dicen cosas que a veces no están correctas, pero cuando hacen esto, lo hacen porque quieren que salgan del tema, para que tomen la carnada y se salgan del tema. They do it to try to bait you to get off subject, because they do not want to deal with what you're expressing. That's why they do that.
And that's what he did on cross-examination. I feel he purposely took so much time not answering the question. And anyone can see this debate. So much time in order that he would avoid my specific questions on grammar, on particular exegesis of the text, just going all over the place to avoid answering, and he burned up all the time.
Yeah, dice que se comió mucho del tiempo hablando de muchas cosas que realmente no estaban tratando con el asunto, pero esa es una táctica que hacen las personas cuando debaten.
And it was most frustrating because I presented clear linguistic grammatical evidence for particular passages that I was showing where the Son is pre-existing or pre-existed with the Father. There was no exegetical response. It was just the same old oneness blather.
Yeah. Dice que él expresa su frustramiento porque él presentó evidencia lingüística, y sí lo presentó, yo lo miré, yo lo estaba analizando, yo estaba presente en este día, y presentó evidencia lingüística sólida, demostrando que sí había distinción de personas. You showed that there was a distinction and that the Son pre-existed, y que el Hijo preexistió antes. He didn't deal with that. He didn't even touch that. No trató con eso.
No, and I spent some time on John 1 and John 17:5. These are some of the standard passages that so clearly teach the preexistence of the Son. And I would challenge everyone to consult scholarly sources, because in the world of scholarship, we find a Trinitarian affirmation. We find passages that I brought out which scholars agree with in terms of teaching clearly that the Son pre-existed with the Father as a distinct person.
Dice que él presentó la evidencia de Juan 1:1, Juan 17:5, y que en el mundo académico que la mayoría de los eruditos son trinitarios, y él presentó la evidencia donde se demostraba todo esto.
One of the passages I started out with was with John 1:1, and first I explained that whatever translation you have, as long as it's not a New World Translation, even someone who, a new convert, a youth reading this would never get the oneness interpretation, that the word is somehow the Father's thought or so on and so forth, only the Father's thought. It just doesn't read like that in a translation. Yeah. Now the Greek's, of course, as you know, more clear. And I specifically showed the imperfect tense was antecedent to the time of the beginning, meaning the Word was always there in the beginning, and the Word was with the Father, right, with God. And I challenged Ritchie in cross-examination to provide an example where the phrase "with the God," prostantheon, is used to denote what the oneness people assert. And I said, it's used 20 times in the New Testament, and only 3 times is it used with the neuter. And I said, aside from where the neuter article's used, because obviously the things pertaining to God, I said, but there's not one place, aside from the neuter, where someone who is prostantheon is not distinct from God. Not one place. And his response, he went to the neuters.
He didn't even understand when I saw that part, it was obvious to me that he didn't grasp what you were saying.
Right.
Because that was very clear. He went to the text that you were giving the exemptions and why you were saying why, because of the neuter article. He didn't get that. Él está mencionando como él habló de Juan 1:1, específicamente de la frase prostantheon, donde habla que estaba con el Dios, y que él señaló que cada vez que aparece la frase así siempre se ve una distinción, y aparece 20 veces en el Nuevo Testamento, y le dijo que las únicas ocasiones donde hay excepciones, donde se encuentra el artículo neutro ta, que te dice las cosas que pertenecen a Dios, y en esos casos se puede traducir de esa manera. But you didn't see the neuter article in John 1:1. No se miraba the things that pertain to God. That's why you cannot translate it the way they do. Por eso no lo pueden traducir como ellos lo hacen así. Isn't that correct?
Absolutely. It's just not there. It's preceded by a me. And the time, it's just so interesting. Even though I clearly told him, except where the neuter is used, which is not the case with John 1:1, show me a place. Because 20 times, aside from the 3 where the neuter is used, they're a distinct person or persons with God the Father every single time.
And he just didn't understand that. And I honestly believe he still doesn't understand it. No creo que lo entienda hasta este punto. Todavía creo que ni lo entiende. But that was very clear. You know what gets me is where did they get the idea that the Logos is the thought of God? Because the text says the Logos is God.
Right.
El texto dice que el verbo era Dios, no dice que el verbo era el pensamiento de Dios, but that's forcing something into the text.
No, and again, if you can consult with scholarship, you'll see that no one holds to that oneness position. There's no scholar, recognized scholar. There's no lexical source that says, yes, this is what it means at John 1:1. You just can't find it. And they always, that is, I think, the thorn in their flesh. That is
a very good point. So you're saying that there's no scholar that you're aware of, I'm not aware of any either, that says here in John 1:1 in their lexicon or in their grammar, the word was with God means the word was the thought of God that was with God. I've never seen that either. You've never seen that. Está diciendo un punto muy importante. Él está diciendo que él no conoce de ningún libro de gramática o léxico o ningún erudito del griego que diga que en Juan 1:1, donde dice que el Logos estaba con Dios, que eso significa que el verbo solamente era el pensamiento de Dios en la mente de Dios. As a matter of fact, this is the challenge that I gave my opponent when I debated a Colombian leader on John 1:1. That's the very same point. Can you show me one text, one grammar or lexicon or any reference work where a scholar says that John 1:1 means what you say it means? And he never gave me any answer. También le estoy mencionando cuando yo tuve un debate con el señor Clavijo. Yo le dije que me diera un léxico o una gramática donde ese erudito vea que Juan 1:1 significa que el verbo era solamente el pensamiento de Dios o el plan de Dios en su mente. Y nunca me dio esa evidencia, y el doctor Dalcour también hizo este reto a su oponente y tampoco lo pudo dar. I've never seen any evidence like that.
No. In fact, I was just pulling up some patristic evidence where church fathers from Hippolytus, Theophilus, Clement of Alexandria, they interpret John 1:1 like we do. Now, these are early church fathers.
Dice que está buscando ahorita diferentes padres apostólicos de la iglesia que ellos ni ellos interpretaban el verbo así como lo están los unicitarios, lo interpretan como nosotros lo interpretamos. Basically, it says the word was God, so hey, the word was God. That's what it says.
The Word was God.
That's what it says.
And the Word was with God.
That's right.
Not was God.
How? I don't know, but that's what it says.
Yeah.
Le digo que dice que el verbo era Dios y que el verbo estaba con Dios. En alguna manera que no podemos comprender. There's a distinction, but yet he's the same being. He's the same God.
And it's the same logos, the same person as in 1:18, which Ritchie, I remember you and I were discussing a post he made on John 1:18, where we have the, and I'll explain it slowly, where we have the articular participle in John 1:18, denoting timeless existence. The particular participle of the one being, haon in the Greek. No one has ever seen God at any time. The one and only God, monogenes theos, the one and only God, who is haon, the one being, the one always being, is in his bosom. He has exegesita. He's explained the Father.
Right.
How that is only consistent in the context, consistent with monotheism in the context of Trinitarianism.
Te está explicando el texto de Juan 1:18 donde dice Jaón, el que ha existido, y en ese contexto vemos que es el Hijo que ha existido, y en el contexto de Juan 1:1 estaba con el Padre. That's like a summary of John 1:1, John 1:18. And you know what else is interesting is that the word kolpos for bosom, if you look up all the different meanings, like for example in Walter Bauer's lexicon, none of the meanings fit the context, only one, and that's the one of an intimate relationship. Because one of them is, if I remember correctly, the dock of a port where the ships dock in the port. Yeah. That's one. That doesn't mean that there. There's a couple of other meanings, but the only meaning that fits the context is one of an intimate relationship.
And you don't have to know Greek to know that. You can read what it says.
Just read it.
He's in the bosom of a distinct person.
Yep.
He's in the bosom of someone else, a distinct person.
Está diciéndole, yo le comenté que donde dice que estaba en el seno, si ustedes examinan ese término, solamente hay varias posibles interpretaciones para ese término. Ninguna le da el contexto más que una de una relación íntima. Y dice que ni tienen que saber griego para eso, obviamente. Ahí dice que estaba el Hijo con el Padre en una relación íntima.
And also in John 1:18, so he ridicules my assertion that it means timeless, in these contexts, it means timeless existence. However, we find the same articular participle in Romans 9:5 referring to the one in the flesh, Christ, who is, according to the flesh, who is God over all, right? Who is always.
Yeah.
We see the same articular participle in Revelation 1:8. Would he also say it doesn't mean timeless existence? In Revelation 1:8,
right.
You know, who is, who was, and who is to come.
Está mencionando que su oponente le señaló que donde dice que en Juan 1:18, Jaón, el que es, que no significa eternidad, porque obviamente él niega la eternidad de la preexistencia del Hijo, pero el doctor Dalcour le señaló que, por ejemplo, el mismo término se localiza en Romanos 9:5, donde habla de Cristo, y ahí se usa el mismo participio y denota obviamente Dios es eterno. And what's the other one in Revelation?
Revelation 1:8. I am the Alpha and Omega.
Yes. Dice también en Apocalipsis 1:8 se ve la misma cosa. Aún es el mismo participio presente. And it's interesting that the Son is described with verbs and participles that denote a continuous action, as in Hebrews 1, Colossians 1, hasestene kon tou theou. You remember that one? Hebrews 1, John 1:1, and it's just Revelation.
In Revelation, it's all over the place.
It's all over the place. Se ven muchas indicaciones que el Hijo era eterno. As a matter of fact, Colossians says he was before all things.
He was before all things, and he created all. In him, all things sunestikain, hold together.
Yeah. Le mencioné que en Colosenses 1:17 dice que él es antes de todas las cosas. Now, how long have all things been held together? Well, since the beginning of creation. Well, how can the Son have been holding everything together if he wasn't there to hold them together? He must have been there before they were created.
That's another point I brought out in the debate where in John 1:3, Colossians 1:16, 1 Corinthians 8:6, and Hebrews 1:2 and Hebrews 2:10 all indicate that the Son was dia with the genitive. Through him, right? Because of him, which, as we know in New Testament, or in New Testament Greek, agency is denoted in three ways. Daniel Wallace makes this great point in his grammar ultimate agent, intermediate agent, that which the ultimate agent uses to carry out the act, and the impersonal agent. And they're denoted by the particular following cases of dia and the particular participles as well. The Son is presented as the agent, intermediate agent of creation.
Yeah.
So he's the one in which the ultimate agent used to carry out the act. How is the intermediate agent able to create all things if he did not exist?
Está señalando los puntos comunes que hacemos nosotros, que se usa la preposición día con el caso genitivo y se usa muchas veces para describir al Hijo antes de la creación, por ejemplo, como en Colosenses 1 y en Corintios, dice que todas las cosas fueron creadas por medio de Él. Pero ¿cómo es que todo fue creado por medio del Hijo si el Hijo no estaba presente para crear esas cosas? Well, you know, they say, well, he was in the mind of God, but that doesn't really say anything. So what? I mean, we're all in the mind of God. What does that mean?
Actually, that was a really good point you made before to me, where, you know, we have people in our minds. It doesn't mean they never exist.
Yeah, that doesn't mean they don't exist. So what?
And their assertion is that the Son was in the mind only of God.
Only, that's the key word. And dice la palabra clave es, ellos presuponen que estaba en la mente solamente como un pensamiento. Obviamente estaba en la mente como un pensamiento. Todos estábamos en la mente de Dios como un pensamiento. Pero ¿qué significa eso? Pero cuando ellos dicen que solamente, and there is the presupposition, they insert the word only. They do it everywhere. They do it in other texts, and we're going to discuss John 6:38, and I'll mention it when you get there. Go ahead.
So in John 1:1, there was no interaction with the text.
En Juan 1:1 dice que no había ninguna intercambio bueno con el texto.
There was only modalistic assumptions and assertions.
Solamente había puras presuposiciones modalistas de su opositor.
There was he was completely devoid of exegetical interaction on John 1:18.
Yeah, he was. Y dice que básicamente su oponente, el señor Steve Ritchie, realmente no trató exegéticamente con el texto en Juan 1:18, because I don't know if they can. I don't know if they know how to do that. Maybe there's a couple, maybe there's some that'll do it, but very rarely do I find people that want to go
step by step.
Yeah, step by step, dealing with the whole thing from the Greek. That's why I wouldn't debate Ritchie. I mean, I give you a lot of credit for going up there. It just,
well, it was frustrating because in his opening, he makes the statement, "I love to study." I love to study, and I'm thinking, what in the world are you studying?
Yeah.
Because and if you notice, he throws out a couple Greek words like Matthew 1:18, ek, ek, and the preposition means from the Holy Spirit. I think he was making some point about the Holy Spirit. But of course, so he uses Greek words, and then when we get to the on my cross-examination and in my opening, I exegeted particular passages in which I utilize linguistic and grammatical evidence to prove my point. He didn't respond to any of that, but he says he loves to study.
What is he studying?
I don't know. Other oneness writers. Now you get a guy like Roger Perkins, who's known for being just having dishonest scholarship, abusing lexicons, and in which he never owned up to. He never took responsibility for that. I don't know if he still does it. And you saw the post on, and we'll get to John 6:38. He's saying, I don't know what I'm talking about, but then when he gives his explanation, anyone who knows basic Greek knows he has no idea what he's talking about. And he claims he has a Greek tutor.
Yeah, I know. I've had a few discussions with him too, but it's very frustrating dealing with people that it's just not being honest. It's just going around and around, and it's not scholarly. That's the word I wanted to say. What was another thing that stands out to you from this debate?
I actually underestimated. I'll say again, I underestimated how he just lacked. I didn't know it would be this bad, meaning his lack of interaction, and it almost left me, befuddled, because a lot of points I was making, I wanted the audience to understand, but I would. Understanding Ritchie, he just stood there in a dense fog with some of my explicating some of the passages, and I didn't know it'd be that bad.
Te pregunté qué más se recuerda de este debate. Dice que él no pensaba que iba a ser así de malo, en el sentido que en verdad es como que su oponente estaba en otra categoría, no estaba captando qué es lo que estaba diciendo. And another difficult thing is that you have the audience, and a lot of the audience doesn't really understand very technical Greek jargon and grammar and syntax and things like that, linguistics. Most people don't understand that kind of stuff. So sometimes in debates, the debates are swayed by just pure theatrics. Mm-hmm. And in this case, this is what I saw with Ritchie. For example, you believe one thing. Oh, John 10:30. Oh, Isaiah 9:6. Oh, but Galatians 4:4 says this. So all you do is you cite a bunch of texts. You presuppose their interpretation of every single text. You lump them all together, and somehow you think that that is proving your position of the particular text that you guys were supposed to exegete. And I didn't see that. That's all silliness.
No, and I will say he was much more. He was gracious in the sense he wasn't making lots of ad hominem attacks. You get a loudmouth like Perkins, just rattling. That's what he does. He rattles super fast, and he just goes from this verse to that verse to this verse. And anyone that understands, first of all, debate knows that he has a weak position to start with because he has to do that.
Yeah.
Plus the dishonest scholarship. Yeah. But Ritchie, what I noticed, he had a huge notebook of notes, and I was close to him, and I looked at his notebook of notes, and seriously, the notes looked like they were 30 years old. They were faded. The colors that he highlighted were faded, and I came to this conclusion: he must use that notebook, because I've seen some of his debates, in every single debate, aside from what the subject matter is, because if you notice, he kept going on different topics, the Old Testament and John 5, and all these things that had nothing to do with the pre-existence of the Son in the passages that prove it.
Nuevamente está diciendo cómo muchas veces se salía del tema. Dice que las notas de él se miraban como que eran notas ya muy antiguas y que él ha notado que usa el mismo material en cualquier debate que él usa, y pues se ve como que solamente está repitiendo cosas que ya ha repetido en el pasado. I did see that, and it's just it was a very unique experience to see one side and then the other side, because he was really not interacting. Él no estaba en realidad tratando con lo que tú estabas diciendo. He wasn't interacting with what you were saying. And so
what these guys do, they go into default mode, and then they're just spewing out oneness assertions aside from what's presented to them. That's what Ritchie was doing. In another passage that I brought forward. Now, again, there's many, many, many passages, but I wanted to bring out some of the jugular passages, right? And John 6:38. Now, you've dialogued with Steve Ritchie. Yeah. What were some of his, in your dialogue with him back and forth, what was his main assertion on John 6:38 as terms of the referential identity?
Él está mencionando que yo he tenido discusiones con este apologista también, y sí las he tenido en inglés, sobre el texto de Juan 6:38, y me está preguntando cuáles son algunas cosas que él me ha dicho. Well, to be honest with you, a lot of the things that he says are very confusing. I have to read them numerous times. It sounds like he jumps from one thing to another. Okay. For I have descended from heaven, not to do my will, but to do the will of him who sent me. That's what the text says. And I ask him, okay, so who is speaking here? Who is the one that descended? Well, it's the Holy Spirit of God that descended, who became a man, 100% man. There's a lot of tap dancing around the text, but it really doesn't explain it. It really doesn't explain it. Now, I've heard all kinds of responses from oneness people about this text, but I was interested to hear Ritchie's. He couldn't answer that. I wanted to know who is the referential identity speaking here? Who is saying, I have come down? And one question I ask is, well, is this Jesus speaking here? Is he the Son of God speaking? Then they'll say, yeah, okay, so that's the Son of God speaking. Yes. What did the Son of God speaking say about the Son of God? For I have come down from heaven. Okay, not to do my will, but the will of him who sent me. A couple of verses down, it says it was the will of the Father. Mm-hmm. So who came down? Did the Son of God come down? Is it a lie that the Son of God came down from heaven? Yes. Did the Son of God say a lie about the Son of God?
He said that.
Yeah, I've said that before. I think I've said it to Richie. I've said it to numerous, but silence. And I've done it in Spanish, and I've done it in English, and I have some switch to referential identity at mid-verse, while I, the Father, have come down, not to do my will as a man, but only to do the will of the Father. And so he's kind of like split personality going back and forth. And I mentioned how the conjunction hina is never used that way. I've never seen it, not even outside of biblical literature. I've never seen it, and I've asked for evidence, and I've never seen that. So, what's your experience with that?
The first question is, if I'm just an average guy who knows nothing about Greek, nothing about Hebrew, I'm going to say, and I look at from 35. I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me, I'm reading this in just a normal translation, will never hunger.
Yeah.
And whoever believes in me will never thirst.
Yeah.
And I know this is the Son.
Yeah.
Because the coming down from heaven's used in that chapter, in chapter 6 alone, I think 9 times.
A lot of times, yeah.
9 times. And it's differentiated from the Father. So I get to verse 37, and the same person who said, I'm the bread of life, said this, some of you here do not believe. Well, this is Jesus. This is the Son, because he was the bread that came down. And then in there's no break of identity.
Yeah.
Then the next verse in 38, I have come down from heaven. It's the same person. How do you break apart persons there?
Está hablando de cómo es que niegan que Juan 6:38 en todo su contexto claramente está diciendo que el Hijo descendió del cielo y que es la misma persona. I've had some people say, well, that's metaphorical. He came down from heaven like the manna is provided. It means that the Son was provided from heaven. It doesn't mean that he literally came down from heaven. It doesn't mean that he pre-existed. But it's funny because the same phrase, coming down from heaven, is used a lot in the Septuagint. For example, in Elijah, when he made fire come down from heaven. Now, I'm sure those guys there didn't believe that was a metaphorical fire that came down. Those guys were crispy critters. There was actual fire that came down. I think it's a really important point. And not only that, even if it was metaphorical, that assumes that a metaphor cannot be true and non-literal and literal at the same time. When metaphors can be used in both ways. For example, Tommy's a real soldier. I could say that about Tommy, but he could actually be a soldier, and yet I could also mean it metaphorically. Or Michael is a lion. I could actually have a lion called Michael in the zoo. So it could be metaphorically true and literally true. So just because it's metaphorical and they say, well, that's a metaphor, that doesn't prove that it didn't exist.
Absolutely not.
So they have a lot of fallacies. They assume a lot of things prior to proving it. It's an ongoing thing that we see with the oneness people. Estaba explicando que algunos dicen que bajó solamente del cielo metafórico, pero digo que solamente porque si fuera metafórico, eso no prueba que no puede ser verdad, porque hay algunos metáforos que se usan en dos sentidos. Se pueden usar literal y metafóricamente. Por ejemplo, si yo dijera, mi hija es un soldado o soldada, eso no quiere decir que no pueda ser realmente en el ejército, porque mi hija realmente pudiera estar en el ejército y pudiera ser soldada, y también lo puedo usar en un sentido para decir que es una persona muy fuerte. Entonces, solamente porque dicen que es metafórico, eso no explica nada. What else do you remember from John 6:38? ¿Qué más recuerdas de Juan 6:38 in your debate with Ritchie?
I remember I presented scholarship, showing my case. There was no response to scholarship. There was just the same default assertion. It can't mean that. It can't mean that. But particularly, and I did explicate the text, and I did point out, even in any recognized translation, it proves my point, because the first, if we can get rid of the mythology, it's a different person. What's the very first word in the clause? It's hati, because I. It come down, katababeka, because I. It's the same I as 35, 36, 37. Yeah. Okay. And one point that I made grammatically is that you have, and I tried to explain it slowly, but again, Ritchie, he just stood there in a dense fog. And he likes to study, he says. He says, I love to study.
Yeah.
The main verb here, right? Katababeka. It's a perfect tense. I have come down, right? Yeah. I have come down. And I'll read it straight from the Greek. Apatou urano, from the heaven. I have come down from the heaven. Now keep in mind this phrase, apatou urano. We see in John chapter 6 alone, I believe 9 times do we have we have apatou urano, we have ectou urano, and ex urano. denoting the sun coming down 9 times.
Está diciendo un punto que porque muchas veces se ve en este contexto 9 veces que bajó del cielo, bajó del cielo, bajó del cielo, bajó del cielo. Why is the author repeating that phrase so much, that point? Why is he doing that?
9 times.
That's a lot.
Because,
okay, we got the metaphor. Well, okay, we got the metaphor. But 9 times, isn't that like overkill on a metaphor?
And that's only John 6.
Why would you present the same metaphor 8 times or 9 times?
You know, the same, I believe we have ek tu uranu in the Septuagint of Genesis. You can check me out on this, on Genesis 19:24.
Oh, wow.
The
really?
same phrase. Yahweh rained fire and brimstone, or brimstone and fire, from Yahweh out from heaven.
Wow.
In the Septuagint, ek tu uranu.
Dice que también se ve la misma frase en Genesis 19:24, right?
Genesis 19:24.
19:24, dice que Jehová hizo llover fuego del cielo y a Jehová aquí en la tierra, down here on earth. That's interesting. Yeah.
So you have this main verb, to simplify, having come down, right?
Wow.
In order not to do, he's doing something, right? He's actually doing something, poio, not to do the will of me, which literally says, emon, the personal pronouns used, I believe it's used of Jesus in the Gospels. I believe every time, and used of Paul one time. Of me, right? It's the neuter of me, he says. Not to do the will of me, but what? But Allah, to do, but the will of the Pamsantos.
Of him who sent it.
Of him having sent me. That's another verb, having sent. Having sent. Okay, that's the aorist. What do we know normally in Greek grammar? What do we know about when a perfect, the main verb is with the aorist?
Me está preguntando que cuando se usa el aoristo, que qué es lo que sabemos del griego, that the action goes before the head verb. Lo que sabemos es que la acción de ese verbo typically ocurre antes del verbo principal. Usually it goes the action of the main verb, and you could see the main verb right there. It's very clear. Perkins denies this. He inserts implicit information in there, but then in my comments to him, I said, well, you can insert all kinds of implicit information in there. Why stop there? I mean, if you really have to tap dance your way around a verse this bad in order to avoid a theological contradiction, there's something wrong with your theology.
I think John 6:38 is devastating. It to oneness theology. It turns it upside down. And as you saw Perkins' responses, how long was that? You know, all the unrelated passages he was
aside
giving?
from posting, copying and pasting sheets and sheets and sheets of a grammar book, which is totally irrelevant. I honestly, I don't even want to discuss that with him. But the other gentleman, what's his name? Sangu.
Oh,
Marvin.
Marvin, the other oneness guy.
Yeah.
I forgot his last name.
Yeah, I'll discuss with him because he's more level-headed.
Oh, is it?
And he's more respectful and he's calm. But I still haven't heard his response yet.
It's devastating because just from a basic translational standpoint, it proves our position without going. But Greek, perfect tense, main verb, you have the aorist, indicative. Normally, and I'm reading a quote from Greek Grammar Beyond the Basics, page 555, the indicative aorist usually indicates a past time with reference to the time of the speaking. Aorist participles usually present an antecedent time to the time of the main verb. So the fact of the matter is, normally, the aorist comes before the main verb. So what is that saying there? When the aorist comes before the main verb.
Está diciendo el punto que yo hice en mi debate con el pastor Forrera unicitario en Colombia, donde están mencionando que la acción del verbo en este texto normalmente va antes del verbo principal, y me está preguntando qué es lo que significa pues esto aquí. That must mean that the action of having come down from heaven, of being sent, of being sent, occurred before coming down from heaven. So he was sent from heaven.
And what does that say about the action, the poio, the action of doing someone else's will, not his will, but the will of the one who sent me?
Well,
he made that decision.
Yes.
He willed something.
Yes.
Before he came down the earth, that would mean before the incarnation, he had a will.
Yes, he had a will. He had the capacity to make a choice. He existed, which harmonizes perfectly with Philippians 2. So yeah, that shows that he pre-existed. Now, some oneness apologists say, well, how many wills did he have? And we know that's a hot potato. There's differences of opinion in that, right?
Yeah, I would say persons, when you're dealing with persons, not people, persons, they have distinct consciousness because the Son does something distinctly distinct from the Father. The Holy Spirit is sent from the Son and the Father.
One of the things that I've seen, in my opinion, is that we try to reason how an infinite being is based on our limited, finite understanding that's completely depraved by sin. It's like trying to use an outdated computer, trying to understand a super mega computer. You're not going to understand it completely. All we know is what the scriptures say. Yeah, it says the Son came down not to do his will, but the will of him who sent him. It's right there in the text.
Simple dimple.
So somehow, in a way that I don't understand, there's some kind of a distinction in there. I won't go as far as saying that there's three wills. I don't know. I mean, some brothers might say that. That's okay. That's their understanding. But my personal understanding is I could only go with what I have with the data. And this is what I think is possible. Now, it may be possible that God exists in multi-dimensions in a way that we don't fully understand. Somehow there's a plurality that I can't grasp, but all we have is what the text says. But there's no denying that there's a distinction between the Father and the Son.
Absolutely. There's a distinction of function. There's a distinction in communication. We see the Father and Son communicating, having communicable attributes before the incarnation, like even in the Old Testament, where Yahweh interacts or does something on behalf of Yahweh in heaven.
Yeah, that's a powerful verse.
And that's just one of many.
Estaba mencionando el texto. Bueno, yo le mencioné que algunos unitarios dicen, bueno, pues ¿cuántas voluntades tiene? ¿Tiene 3 voluntades o qué? Yo le menciono que en mi opinión, yo sé que hay trinitarios que unos creen que dicen que sí hay 3 voluntades, pero en mi opinión privada es que no sé. Yo sé que existe una distinción, pero también sé que nosotros somos seres humanos con la mente finita y estamos tratando de razonar de un super ser que es perfecto, que no está afectado por el pecado, y que yo entiendo que estamos hablando de un ser que tiene la capacidad de vivir en multidimensiones al mismo tiempo, que puede existir en pluralidad en alguna manera que no puedo entender. Pero yo no voy a salir a decir más de lo que dice la Biblia, pero lo que sí está claro es que el Hijo tiene una voluntad y el Padre tiene una voluntad, y que hay alguna distinción que no podemos entender cómo, pero en Juan 6:38 está muy claro que el Hijo preexistía. That John 6:38 is very clear. What did Ritchie say about this verse? ¿Qué fue lo que dijo Ritchie de este verso?
Then I went to I believe John 17:5.
Oh.
One of the cases I was making, I thought I made it clearly, is that the Father and Son, with these passages like John 6:38, even John 1:1, and there's many other I could have brought forward, is that we find clear cases of communicable activity between the Father and Son.
Dice que una cosa que él le mencionó también, que hay muchos casos donde se ve casos claros de atributos comunicables entre el Padre y el Hijo.
And in response to most of these passages, Ritchie would just go into oneness default mode and saying, it can't be this. It can't be that.
Oh, here's another one. It can't be that. That's absurd. That's a typical knee-jerk response. Una cosa que dicen eso, no puede ser eso. Eso es absurdo. Why can it not be that? Because you say so? Yeah, right. That's why basically they're saying it cannot be that because they can't accept it. Dicen que no puede ser eso porque no lo aceptan. And one thing I wanted to point out that I see a lot, and I saw it that day a lot, oneness people think that simply responding to a question is an answer to the question. It's not. They can just babble on. Well, I already give you my response. That's not a response that's answering the question. That's just words.
Yeah.
You know, so una cosa que ven es que piensan que solamente porque responden están contestando la pregunta, pero no están contestando la pregunta. So what we want was straight responses. Who's speaking here? You know?
Who's the identity?
Who's the identity? In John 17:5 mencionó Juan 17:5. Go ahead and read that verse for us one more time.
Father, translation, Father, glorify me now with the glory I had with you before the world was.
Está citando el texto de Juan 17:5 que le citó. Ahora, Padre, glorifícame tú contigo con la gloria que yo tenía contigo antes de que el mundo fuera.
And in John 17:5 is another passage that I brought out, and there's a few different issues here. Now, I just read it quoted it from an English translation, and whatever translation you have, as long as it's recognized, it's going to read basically the same way. Son had something with the Father before the foundation of the earth. That's simple, dimple stuff.
Yeah.
And Ritchie says he loves to study.
Yeah. You know? Es que el señor Ritchie estaba diciendo que le gusta estudiar mucho, que le gusta estudiar, que era estudioso, pero no estaba tratando con estas cosas. Este texto está muy claro, que está hablando el Hijo de Dios y dijo que tenía gloria con el Padre antes de que el mundo fuera.
And I'm just looking at some lexical notes, but even before I went into that, I made the point, the English does a good job, or translation does a good job, whatever translation you have.
Él dice que las traducciones hacen un buen trabajo en ese texto, pero el punto es que no lo pueden aceptar. So what makes people any different than the Son, since we all existed in the mind of God?
Exactly.
¿Qué es lo que hace al Hijo diferente a todos nosotros si todos existimos en la mente de Dios? Are we all eternal? ¿Todos somos eternos en la mente de Dios? What's the point of that?
Right. There's no response would be no response to that question. And John 17:5 is a case example that where a passage is so difficult for one to explain. They must go. In Perkins' case, he was just dishonest. He says, no, the lexicons say in the mind and all these things, which we know the lexicons don't say that. They don't. And I would challenge anyone to provide a lexicon that has a meaning of para, the preposition, with you, together with yourself. It's used twice, para with the dative. A meaning of in the mind applied to John 17:5. Show me one lexical source. There's none that I'm aware of. Not one.
Dice que también preguntó que le dieran alguna evidencia de alguna fuente léxica donde diga que Juan 17:5 significa que estaba en la mente de Dios. Not only that, but only in the mind of God.
Only in the mind of God.
Yeah, the key word only, because that's what they say. He was only a thought.
Now, glorify me. It's interesting, dokazon, the word to glorify, it's an aorist imperative. And normally aorist imperatives are used to command.
Está hablando del término donde dice que glorifica, que es un imperativo, y dice que normalmente se usa como para dar mandamientos.
There are some cases where it's used as a request, but normally command. Now, of course, the only thing, I think the only problem you would have with the Son commanding the Father if you were a Unitarian.
Dice que la persona que tiene problema con el Padre, el Padre, o the Son asking for the Father, el Hijo preguntando al Padre, son solamente personas unitarias.
But whether it's a command or request, it doesn't matter, because the Son still asserts he had something before with the Father before the foundation of the world. He says, glorify me, you Father, su pater, you Father, para se auto, together with yourself.
Glorifícame tú, Padre, con la gloria que te da contigo, junto contigo.
And this phrase, para se auto, you have para, the preposition with, or an association of, or side by side, you might say, with the dative, indicates, in lexical sources, and I can read a couple, indicates a thayer, dwelling, this is applied to John 17:5. Listen, dwelling with God, John 8:38, equivalent to in heaven, John 17:5. Thayer doesn't give anything within the mind reference. And it's interesting because this para with the datives used about 10 times in the New Testament. And every time, like proston theon, it has an association, distinct association with the object of the preposition. Persons also.
Wow, está diciendo que, I saw that in Wallace too. I think I saw something like that in Wallace.
Near, beside, in the presence of. Of course, Wallace was a Trinitarian because he saw the scripture teaching that. But what's interesting is it's used twice in this text, para with the dative, and it's used 10 times in the New Testament. And Thayer says the only time it's a dative with things is John 19, I think 25, where the women were at the side of the cross.
Oh, right? Yeah.
But he says everywhere else, this is Thayer's words, or this is the lexicon's words, Grimm's actually. It's funny, in my dialogue with Perkins, he didn't understand that Thayer, he thought Thayer actually wrote the lexicon.
Yeah, wow.
But Thayer says, in Thayer's lexicon, That's the only place. All the other places, dative of person.
Yeah.
Dative of person. So glorify me together with yourself, in the presence of, together, a you and I relationship. With the glory, te doxe, the glory. Now here's a very important phrase here. He akon, the glory that I had or I shared.
Yes.
I mean, he's with the Father, and Ritchie dismissed my translation of I shared.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's others who have that same translation because he had something with the Father. I had, and also akon, it's, if you notice, which is different than John 17:22, because they try to connect the glory that Jesus gives the disciples with the glory that he has here.
Right.
The difference is, here it's an imperfect tense. I had, I always had. Vincent always possessed.
Wow.
Whereas in 22, I think it's a perfect. They received it at a point in time, a different glory.
Yeah, está hablando que el tiempo de los verbos son diferentes en Juan 17:5 and John 17:20.
22, there's a reference in 22 and 24.
Donde dice que les ha dado la gloria, es un tiempo como pasado, pero aquí en Juan 17:5 dice, I had, yo tenía, I had the glory.
And as Vincent says, always possessed. It's an imperfect tense
dice
here.
Que como el erudito Vincent dice que siempre ha poseído esa gloria, siempre la ha tenido.
Akon, so I repeatedly had, imperfect tense, pratuton kosmon, before the world was, parasoi, with you.
Antes de que el mundo fuera, yo tenía esta gloria contigo. And that harmonizes perfectly with John 6:38. Eso está en perfecta comunión con Juan 6:38. Philippians chapter 2 from 5 to 10. Exact same thing.
And John 1:18 too.
Juan 1:1, Juan 1:18. Todos los textos están igual. Someone here is saying that he had glory with the Father. Who is that?
The only explanation they have, it was glory in the mind, which completely dismisses and refutes that, is it's not used that way. And there's no lexicon that gives that explanation on John 17:5.
But you know what? Even from a logical perspective, even if he had glory in the mind of God, how on earth does that prove that he was not there?
Right.
That's a logical fallacy. So what? Okay, assuming he did have glory in the mind of God. There's a presupposition only in the mind of God. They insert it. I can say, okay, so what? He had glory in the mind of God, but how does that prove that the Son was not there, actually there?
Right. It doesn't.
It's a fallacy, and they sneak it in everywhere. But of course, I haven't seen a lexicon that even says what they're saying.
And if you look at all the other places where para with the dative is used in John's literature, as I mentioned 10 times, it's never used that way.
Yeah, nunca se usa así para con el dativo. Nunca se usa como lo usan los unicitarios. They are just going against. I mean, they gotta come to some point where they say, you know, this. There's got to be some point where they say, I'm really manipulating the text just to avoid a theological contradiction.
I made the point in the debate, it must be difficult and very frustrating for a Oneness Pentecostal. And again, Ritchie says, I love to study. A Oneness Pentecostal to do research grammatically, to do linguistic research, scholarly research. And everywhere they go, they're faced with Trinitarian references.
Yes. And you know what? Some of my ex-Oneness brothers who I've interviewed, ex-Oneness. I got about 7 of them already that I've interviewed. And I'm going to get them all together in a room and interview them all at the same time. But I'm just waiting for that. But that's about 7 of them, including an English-speaking one. Michael Tate. Yeah. So, but most of them tell me that exactly what you're saying. You know, I kept opening these doors, and I go to this other, and whoa, there it is again. And then I go into this other room, and I open this door, and wow, there it is again. And you start getting tired after a while. Why am I struggling so much? Why do I keep? I mean, for you Oneness people that are out there, if you're sincere, you're going to have to come to a crossroads where you say, I'm doing an awful lot of manipulating to try to avoid a theological contradiction. That's not normal. If you're doing that, there's something wrong. Everywhere we go, it all supports it. The preexistence of the Son. You got Hebrews 1:3, Colossians 1, Philippians 2:5, John 8:58. Who is that speaking there? Before Abraham was, I am. Who is that? Is that Jesus there, the Son of God, speaking?
Right.
It's got to be the Son of God, right?
And you cannot find solace going to the patristic record, because that's even worse for a oneness Pentecostal.
Estamos diciendo que donde quiera se ve la preexistencia del Hijo, y que muchos unicitarios me han dicho, que los que han salido, que se ven y llegan a un punto donde dicen que, ¿por qué es que estoy tratando mucho para tratar de evitar una contradicción cuando el texto está bien claro? Se llega a un punto en el tiempo cuando dicen, hasta aquí puedo llegar, ya no puedo negar que el Hijo, la preexistencia del Hijo. And you know what though, brother? The real big thing about this is that if they're denying that Jesus is the Son, because they too deny that Jesus is the Son, they're denying the Father, because they do not give honor to the Son, they dishonor the Father. If you don't have the Son, you don't even have the Father, so you don't have any. I mentioned John 8:58. When I asked them, is that the Son of God speaking? Yes. Did the Son of God say that he existed before Abraham? Did that Jesus there, being Son of God, did he say he existed before Abraham? Well, yeah, but as, there's the other presupposition. There's a couple of words, or buzzwords, okay? One of them is as. He was speaking as the Father. And here's another one. He was referring to the Father. So the word as, referring, those are, only, as another one. So as, only, referring. Those are the big key words, the presuppositions that oneness people always insert to the text. Well, John 58, he was speaking as a man, as the God man. Who does that sound like? That sounds like Steve Ritchie. He says it all the time. As. No, I'm not asking you if speaking as. I'm asking you if that Jesus speaking, there's a Son of God speaking. Yes or no? Is he the Son of God speaking? Yes, he's the Son of God. Did the Son of God say that he existed before Abraham? Yes or no? Well, he spoke as. No, I'm not asking if he spoke as. Is he the Son of God speaking? Well, he was referring. No, but I'm not asking you if he was referring. I'm asking you if the Son of God speaking say that he existed before Abraham. Yes or no? They can't answer that. Now, here's the second thing I say. If you're a Christian, you claim to be a Christian, and you are really having a hard time admitting that Jesus Christ in any text is the Son of God, there's something wrong with your theology, because no Christian should have even the slightest problem to confess from your mouth that Jesus is the Son of God anywhere.
Right.
You ask me, is Jesus the Son of God?
The Son of God.
Of course. Now, you ask a oneness guy, is this Jesus speaking here in John 58? Is that the Son of God? Okay, see the little footwork, the manipulation. There's something wrong with that theology.
You'd have to.
There's something wrong. Same thing with Philippians chapter 2, verse 5.
Yeah.
Let this mind be in you that was in Christ Jesus. For those that think that it refers to the pre-existing Jesus. Is that the Son of God there?
Yeah, that's interesting. We talked about Philippians. I'll pull it up. Philippians 2:6 through 11, and Ritchie immediately went to his old notes and went to default oneness mode. And it's really interesting because Ritchie should, before he goes publicly with assertions, now he admitted to me he made a lot of mistakes, and he says, so have you, and it's better if we don't show each other our mistakes in the debate. I mean, he was so fearful that I'm just going to present.
We all make mistakes. What's the big deal? I mean, if I make a mistake, I correct it. Big deal. Move on. But,
exactly. And in Philippians 2:6, and we discussed this before, it's either Ritchie, and it's not that he's not intelligent. He can find this information.
Yeah.
He kept avoiding the fact that harpakon is a present active participle. Now, I know you had interaction with him.
Yeah.
What was his main assertion on that verb?
Well, he was saying, at first, that it meant that he came into existence. He actually made a video on this, if I remember correctly, that he came into existence. And then he said that nowhere, he said huparko. He confused it for the inflected form huparko.
Right,
That's
right.
another thing that he did. I don't know if he understands how lexicons work and how the entries work. And how an inflected form of a verb works in a context. I really don't think he understands that. Because the reason I say that is because he made the assertion that meant that he came into existence. And he took that conclusion, transported it to every occurrence in the Bible to then say that Jesus Christ came into existence, the Son of God came into existence. Well, we saw it from Acts 17:24, if I remember correctly, where it's applied to Jehovah. And it's huparkon. It's the exact same inflected form. Yeah. So then begins a tap dancing there. What does it mean? Does it mean that, he came into his kingdom as a ruler of heaven and earth or something like that? I can't remember the exact quote that he said, but basically it refuted his assertion that it could also be used to a referent that's eternal, because God is eternal and it's applied to God right there.
And and when I got to this point, I knew that he's not gonna, he doesn't have the ability to interact, at least on a basic linguistic grammatical level. But I felt that his whole analysis of Philippians 2:6-11 was based on really a concordance, because you would get those meanings from a concordance.
Yeah.
I don't think he actually consulted a lexicon at Philippians 2:6.
Yeah, dice que él piensa que cuando hablamos de Filipenses 2:5, el señor Ritchie decía que donde dice huparkon, que eso significaba que llegó a existir como el Hijo, para así negar la preexistencia del Hijo. En una plática que yo tuve con este apologista, yo le mencioné Hechos 17:24, donde se localiza el mismo término huparkon, y yo le dije que eso se refiere a Dios. Obviamente Dios no comenzó a existir, y entonces cuando le cité ese verso le refuté la idea de que ese participio se usa para decir que comenzó a existir, porque si no tendría que concluir que Dios comenzó. Bueno, como se lo admitió que se puede usar para Dios para decir que Dios es eterno en Hechos 17:24, en la misma manera tiene que confesar que el Hijo es eterno en Filipenses capítulo 2, verso 5. Pero estamos hablando de que el señor Ritchie en realidad no sabe cómo hacer las investigaciones como muchos unicitarios, solamente usa una concordancia, parece que es lo que hace, pero no entiende cómo se usa la inflexión de los verbos en diferentes contextos. And I think he is probably just using a concordance. I don't know.
Because, I mean, I could have given him, dozens of lexical or scholarly affirmations, like even Badag, Morphe Dulula. He's commenting on 2:7 of Philippians. He says, showing the contrast between schema and Morphe. And he says, this is in contrast to the expression of divinity in the pre-existence Christ and Morphe Theo Huparkon. The New International Greek Testament Commentary. The expression does not refer simply to external appearance, but pictures the pre-existence Christ, sharing glory. We can go on, and same with the linguistic conclusion in Thayer, which he gives really what we assert. And he even gives some cross references about it, and he speaks on Kaneo and Meyer. I mean, the list goes on.
Yeah, it goes on and on. Doesn't Thayer say indivisible appearance as it appeared to the inhabitants of heaven?
Yeah, that's one of his main points.
Now that's very interesting, because I'm glad you brought this text up, because Ritchie made a big thing out of this one. Morphe to him means it's only the man, the external. Okay, but I told him this, and he ignored this. Thayer's right there says that he was the visible form, and now not only that, but to the inhabitants of heaven.
Yeah.
So he assumes that visible is only flesh. See that? That's
exactly
the presupposition right there. But right here, Thayer, no, there's spiritual beings that can see him too. So that refutes his idea that Morphe means only flesh. It doesn't mean that.
And Thayer doesn't go against the other lexicons.
Nope.
It's pretty objective. He says, here's what Thayer actually said: the whole passage is to be explained as follows: who, although formerly when he was logos sarkos, right?
The logos before he became flesh.
Before flesh, without flesh, he bore the form in which he appeared to the inhabitants of heaven.
He appeared to the inhabitants of heaven. So he had a form.
Yes.
And now we know it wasn't a man. So he existed. And a visible appearance doesn't mean only flesh.
Right. That's what they're
assuming. Now, you know what's interesting? So it could also refer to nature then, because he also took on the form of a man. He didn't only take the appearance of a man, he actually became a man. Right. He took on the nature of a man. So he was already huparkon, existing in the nature of God, and then took upon the nature of a man, and he continued to exist in the nature of God. That's why the present participle. He never stopped being God.
No, and he's coming back again.
He's coming back again.
God in the flesh.
Yeah.
Acts 17.
Two natures. Another thing that he said about Morphe was that he could not understand where we got the notion of eternal, and he kept saying, "Where is an eternal Morphe? Where's an eternal?" And I'm like, where are you getting? Who's saying that Morphe means eternal?
I've never read anyone who said that.
Where's he getting this from?
That's the first time I heard that an assertion so absurd.
Yeah, and I asked for proof. Well, who's saying that Morphe means eternal? I never got that. He doesn't. Honestly, he just does not know what he's saying. And I asked him, do you even know where Trinitarians get the notion of eternity from this context?
Right.
Never got it.
And a common response is to apply to certain scholars like Raymond or a few others who see the Carmen Christi as referring to the Christ-Adam contrast, where the emptying has to do with his emptying on the cross and his earthly emptying and so on and so forth, or his earthly life. And they'll appeal to that. But my question is, could you explain why, exegetically, what is their exegetical conclusions? Why do they come up with that? And they just don't know why. They just like it. But the fact of the matter is, the ones they quote, guess what? They're all Trinitarian.
Yep. Estamos hablando de Filipenses capítulo 2, que como también habla de la preexistencia del Hijo, que morfe, porque Ritchie decía que morfe, que nosotros creamos que el término morfe significaba eterno, pero nosotros nunca dijimos que significa eterno. La noción o la idea semántica de eternidad se deduce del participio presente huparkon, que es el mismo que se localiza en Hechos 17:24. Pero morfe significa naturaleza, porque así como tomó, existiendo la naturaleza de Dios, dice que tomó, se hizo hombre, no solamente era la apariencia de hombre, sino tomó la naturaleza de hombre. Entonces, morfe se localiza el mismo término, se está haciendo un contraste con la naturaleza de hombre y la naturaleza de Dios. They ignore the contrast between the nature of God and the nature of man.
Right.
And to those oneness who say that this has nothing to do with a pre-existence reference, they just make it a reference to the earthly ministry of Jesus Christ. Well, they find problems in Philippians chapter 2, verse 7, where it says he became a man. Yeah, and the interesting thing is that the word to become there is the same word found in Galatians 4:4. They love that verse. Who born of a woman, made a man. I think I don't remember the exact verse, Galatians 4:4, but he became a man. It's the same word that's found in Philippians chapter 2, verse 7. So if Galatians 4:4 means that Jesus the Son became a man, then in Philippians chapter 2, that means that the man became a man. But what does that mean? How, if it's a reference to the not a reference to the pre-existent Christ, then how did the Son, already a man, according to Ritchie, according to Morphe, how did the Son become a man again in Philippians chapter 2, verse 7?
No, it's an impossibility to hold to their conclusion.
You can't.
But it's a desperate attempt, and that's why I think they like to do crash and burn, meaning they like to do hit and run. They like to just rattle off bits and pieces. And I believe I stated this, Ritchie is a bit and piece guy. So is Perkins. They get bits and pieces of scholarship, a bit here, a piece here, to form a general conclusion that's so divorced from the actual text.
Dice que Ritchie y otro apologista que se llama Perkins son personas que solamente agarran pedazos de aquí, pedazos de allá de información y la pegan para hacer algo. Ritchie actually copies and pastes even previous things that he's done in the conversations. That's why there's a lot of the things that he says are so irrelevant to the conversation. Yeah. So I don't know. What else do you remember from this debate?
Also, and the things we're going through right now, if you watch the debate, of course you were there, but anyone watches the debate, they can see clearly he did not present any textual interaction. Not only in Philippians, nor did he respond to the scholarship, who decidedly is against his position on all these passages. Then we went to, I remember in Hebrews 1:8 or 1:10, he responded to 1:8. I didn't even talk about 1:8. My issue was 1:10 and 1:6, I believe. I didn't have time to go to verse 3 where it says it's the Son, and you mentioned this a little while ago. The participle of eimi is used there too. On, who is always, right? Timeless existence. The apagasmates doxes, the glory, the shining and glory of God, and the exact representation of his nature. Verse 6, the Father commands all the angels, pantes, all the angels to what? Worship the Son. He says again, when he brings his firstborn into the world, he brings someone else in. He commands all the angels to worship the Son. And I pointed out that the word worship there is aorist imperative, stressing the urgency. But how is it that the Father can command all the angels to worship a human son? How is that not in contradiction to Exodus 25 and other places?
Está hablando que también citó el texto de Hebrews 1:6, correct? Hebreos 1:6, que dice que cuando entra el primogénito del mundo, dice el Señor que todos los ángeles le adoren. Pero si el punto de vista unicitario solamente es que el Hijo solamente es la carne, entonces ¿cómo es que Dios quiere que solamente adoren a la creación? O sea, sería una contradicción. It would be idolatry, would it not? To worship creation.
It would be idolatry. And that was, in fact, I asked this question to Unitarian I was having a dialogue with, and he said he has no problem with angels worshiping a creature. Okay.
Well, this is the exact same point that I made with a Mexican cult called La Luz del Mundo, the light of the world. And he said the exact same thing. Well, if God says so, it's okay. So God's going to say worship a creature when you're not supposed to worship creature according to Romans. Worship creation, that's wrong. Well, this, as you know, this is so problematic for the Jehovah's Witnesses that they had to change Hebrews 1:6 to say let them all do
obeisance.
Obeisance, yeah. So they removed the word worship, but the 1950 translation doesn't say that. It does say worship. I think it's very interesting.
The 1950 through 1970 edition. All those editions, they were deceiving unknowingly. They having this word worship in the New World Translation, and they changed in 1971.
And I have their literature, and from Brother Jim Babber, he has some of it, a lot of it. He has everything basically, showing us that they changed what they thought. At first, they said it was okay to worship the sun. There's nothing wrong with it. Now there's something wrong with it. So Jehovah either made a mistake or he changed his mind. People got lost, have no hope for eternal life back then because they believed the truth of Jehovah, and now Jehovah changes truth to something else. But yeah, that's a problematic text to anybody who denies the pre-existence of the sun.
Yeah, it very much is. And then I went to, there was no response to that. And then I remember my debate with Nathan Dudley, and it's interesting that the debates I had with some oneness people, they always came to me. I didn't seek out, as Perkins says, soft targets. I didn't seek them out. They came to me.
What does that mean, soft target?
As if only Perkins is the hard target and everyone else is soft target.
So what makes him a hard target?
The more you can ramble, probably, the more aggressive you are. I'm not sure.
I thought that was funny. Está diciendo que él no busca debates que por la mayoría son ellos que lo buscan. Same thing with me. I don't really go around looking for debates. I mean, when I have debates, I make sure to try to make them worthwhile, something that's algo que valga la pena. Personalmente, para mí no me gusta debatir con cualquier persona porque en verdad muchas veces nomás es perder el tiempo, pero si la persona se ve seria, que estudia y en verdad quiere ser un debate académico, yo siempre estoy dispuesto para debatir con las personas que niegan la preexistencia del Hijo de Dios.
One of in a debate that Ritchie did, and it was with Ethan Smith.
Oh yeah.
At 1:35, 1 minute 35, or 1 hour 35. Ritchie says, before God became a man, Jesus created all things. He said the Son could not have created all things as the Son. He couldn't.
Wait. You said the key word, as.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So Jesus, Ritchie says, created all things. That makes him the Father. That makes him the Father? Why can't I just read the text and not read into these things?
Yeah.
Why, if that's true, I always point this out. Now, Jesus is called Son over 200 times. He's never called Father in the New Testament. He never refers to himself as Father. Neither did the apostles.
Yeah.
179 times he refers to the Father as somebody else.
Yeah. Repeat those facts. Tell me the first one again.
Over 200 times Jesus is referred to as Son and never the Father.
Más de 200 veces en el Nuevo Testamento Jesús se refiere como el Hijo y no como el Padre. And what was the other point? It was very important information you're giving us.
And about 179 times he refers to the Father as your Father, my Father, the Father. Someone distinct from himself.
Y como 179 veces Jesús se refiere al Padre como mi Padre, como tu Padre, o como alguien distinto de él. Nunca dice que yo soy el Padre. He never says I am the Father.
He never says I am the Father.
Nunca ha dicho eso. Those are interesting numbers. So esos son números interesantes documentando cómo es que hablaba Jesús.
But yet 200 times he refers to himself as the Son. And no one referred to him as the Father in the New Testament.
Nadie se refirió a Jesús como el Padre en el Nuevo Testamento. Y Jesús, más de 200 veces se refiere como el Hijo. Eso es algo muy interesante.
And, it's just amazing that if he is the Father, why didn't somebody tell us in the New Testament?
Y dice que es increíble que si Jesús es el Padre, ¿por qué no nos dijo alguien en el Nuevo Testamento? And it's just not there.
No, and when we went, the whole idea about the Son being the creator, and I pressed him on this, but there was no response. Dia with the genitive at Colossians 1:16, 1 Corinthians 8:6, Hebrews 1:2, Hebrews 2:10, all have the Son dia auto, or dia with the genitive. Every single passage that speaks about the Son creating shows that he is the actual agent of creation.
Yeah. Está mencionando que cómo es que dice que todo fue creado por medio de él, por medio del Hijo, en Colosenses 1:16, donde se usa la preposición día con el caso genitivo. Dice que él era la gente que estaba involucrado en creando. El Hijo estaba ahí creando. Go ahead.
And consider this, some more stats. Okay, 200 times Jesus is explicitly referred to the Son, never once the Father.
Ok, 200 veces, lo está mencionando otra vez, 200 veces Jesús es explícitamente mencionado como el Hijo y no como el Padre.
Over 200 times in the New Testament, the Father is referred to Jesus as someone else being clearly distinct from Jesus.
Más de 200 veces el Padre es descrito como alguien distinto de Jesús. Someone distinct from Jesus, right?
Yeah, distinct.
Distinto de Jesús, ajá.
Over 50 times, the Father and Jesus the Son are presented as explicitly distinct in the same passage.
50 veces o más de 50 veces se ve que el Padre y el Hijo son distintos en el mismo verso.
And we talked about John 6, where it says he came ectu urano, or from the heaven.
Hablamos de Juan 6:38, donde dice que es ectu urano, del cielo.
He came from heaven 9 times.
9 veces se dice eso, ectu urano, del cielo.
In the Gospel of John,
en el Evangelio de Juan,
at least 40 times Jesus refers to himself as being sent by the Father.
Wow.
By the Father.
En el Evangelio de Juan, al menos 40 veces, escuchen bien, 40 veces Jesús se refiere a sí mismo decir que él vino del Padre, that he came from the Father.
And Jesus never says, I sent myself.
Jesús nunca dijo, el Hijo nunca dijo, yo me envié yo solo.
And Jesus never says, I sent the Son.
Y Jesús nunca, ustedes van a buscar la Biblia, nunca dijo, yo envié al Hijo.
And lastly, over 200 times in the New Testament, Scripture speaks of the Holy Spirit and Jesus as distinct persons.
Y finalmente, la Escritura menciona a Jesús y el Espíritu Santo como distinto 200 veces, 200 times.
And never once is there an explicit reference where where someone called Jesus the Father, or someone referred to Jesus as the Holy Spirit.
Y no hay ninguna ocasión en la Biblia donde alguien explícitamente le llama a Jesús el Padre o le llama a Jesús el Espíritu Santo. There's always a distinction. Siempre hay una distinción.
One of my last verses that I presented in the debate was Hebrews 1:10, as mentioned. We went through 1:6. There was no response. How the Father can have the angels worship the Son. Is he divine or human?
Una de las cosas dice que en el debate que tuvo con el señor Ritchie, que él mencionó Hebreos 1:6, que no había ninguna respuesta de cómo es que el Padre dice que todos los ángeles adoren al Hijo, si el Hijo solamente es la creación.
Similar to Daniel 7:14, where the Father gives all authority and so on and so forth to the Son of Man, who's the cloud rider.
Y similar a Daniel 7:14, donde habla del Hijo. What else does it say?
And Yahweh is the only cloud rider in the Old Testament.
Y Yahweh es el único que anda en la nube en el Antiguo Testamento.
And it says that all similar to Matthew 28:19 and 20, or 18 through 20.
Muy similar a Mateo 18 a 19.
And it says all the languages, or all the men will worship him.
Todos los hombres lo van a adorar.
The Septuagint has latruo. Some editions have duluo. But the term in a religious context, as verse 27 in Daniel, denotes worship. That's why some translations translate worship.
En el verso 27 denota adoración. En Daniel, what did it say?
7:14.
17:14, ahí se denota adoración, worship, correct?
Right, and 7:9.
Y 7:9.
Thrones were set up.
Los tronos estaban puestos.
Throne.
no trono, dice tronos. Plural?
Plural, yeah.
Plural.
Son of Man, Ancient of Days.
Wow, that's right.
Clearly differentiated.
Yeah. Hay una distinción.
As the object of divine worship.
Very interesting.
And then I went to verse 10. Now keep in mind, I didn't mention verse 8. And the response I get from Ritchie was a whole diatribe on verse 8. Yeah. I never mentioned verse 8.
El doctor Dalcour nunca mencionó Hebreos 1:8, mencionó 1:10 and 6 and 10.
Yeah,
right?
6 and 10 are the ones I mentioned.
Él mencionó 6 y 10, no el 8, pero el señor Ritchie se fue para el 8 y gastó mucho tiempo en eso. Es otra táctica. Why did he do that? Did he not listen, or did he just...
I don't think he was, again, I don't think he wasn't prepared to have a scholarly debate.
Dice que él, en su opinión, su oponente no estaba preparado para tener un debate académico.
And in verse 10, you, Lord, in the beginning laid the foundations of the earth, and the heavens are the work of your hand.
Tú, Señor, estás diciendo Hebreos 1:10, tú, Señor, hiciste la tierra y toda la creación es la obra de tus manos.
Now, a couple interesting points that I brought out. First, the context is the Father addressing the Son.
Aquí el contexto es el Padre está hablando con el Hijo.
In verse 8, about the Son, he says.
En el verso 8 está hablando del Hijo. Él dice.
And this is the same Son in verse 6 in which the Father tells all the angels to worship. Same one.
Y este es el mismo Hijo del verso 6, el cual el Padre dice que todos los ángeles lo adoren.
This is the same Son who's presented as Creator in verse 2.
Es el mismo Hijo que se presenta en el verso 2 como el Creador.
And the same Son in verse 3 who has the exact representation of the nature of the Father.
Y el mismo Hijo que tiene la exacta representación de la naturaleza de Dios. En el verso 3.
So in verse 8, he's called Hotheos, he's called the God, and what Ritchie does, he doesn't interact, he doesn't present an argument from the New Testament author. He goes back to the Old Testament and gives the Old Testament definition.
En el verso 8, Ritchie no presenta la interpretación aquí del argumento del autor, sino que se va para el Antiguo Testamento.
He would fail a hermeneutic class.
Dice que él fallaría una clase de hermenéutica con la práctica que él está haciendo. He doesn't read the context, or what?
Well, the problem is we interpret the old on these kind of passages where they're cited by the revelation of the New Testament, not the opposite.
Not the opposite. Sí, ese es un punto porque dice que él interpretó el pasaje del Antiguo con la luz del Antiguo Testamento, cuando sabemos que el Nuevo Testamento es un cumplimiento del Antiguo Testamento y el Nuevo Testamento nos da la luz del Antiguo Testamento. The New Testament is the new light that gives us, as far as that's how we know about the prophecies. Por eso sabemos de las profecías.
So if the author of Hebrews tells us what it means, we embrace the New Testament revelation.
Entonces, si el autor del Hebreos te está diciendo qué es lo que significa, tenemos que aceptar qué es lo que significa el autor del Nuevo Testamento. No ir para el Antiguo Testamento para tratar de buscar una solución, porque el Nuevo Testamento es un cumplimiento. Por eso es que conocemos las profecías, por ejemplo. Las profecías que están en el Antiguo Testamento a veces no estaban muy claras, pero en el Nuevo Testamento se nos hacen claras. Entonces, lo que diga el Nuevo Testamento con eso es lo que nos vamos a basar.
In verse 10, it's still about the Son. There's no change. In verse 8, about the Son, he says. It's flowing.
Vemos que en el contexto se está desenvolviendo. El contexto en el verso 8 habla del Hijo. Luego en el verso 10, en verse 10 says what?
And in verse 10, you, Lord, in the beginning laid the foundation of the earth, and the heavens are the work of your hands.
En el verso 10, tú, Señor, hiciste la tierra y fundaste el mundo, y la creación es la obra de tus manos.
Now, a couple things to be said. First of all, very interesting. We know he's addressing the Son. In verse 10, the actual case of direct address is used to the Son.
Dice que en el verso 10, el caso de donde se dirige directamente se usa del Hijo.
Kuriai. Which is the vocative of kurios.
Se ve el vocativo, y el vocativo es donde el que está hablando, el escritor, se refiere directamente a la persona con la cual está hablando.
Now, why this is devastating for oneness theology? First of all, we look at the whole prologue. We don't just dice it like they do, bits and pieces. First, it presents the Son as God, distinct from the Father. Simple stuff.
Primeramente, presenta al Hijo distinto del Padre, algo muy simple.
Number 2, it presents the Son as divine.
También presenta al Hijo como divino.
Distinct from the Father.
Distinto del Padre.
But in verse 10,
pero en el verso 10,
as the Apostle Paul said,
como dijo el apóstol Pablo,
as the Apostle John said in John 1:3,
así como dijo Juan en 1:3,
the Son is the agent of creation.
El Hijo es el agente de la creación.
In the Greek text, he's actually addressing the Son.
En el texto griego, esto es muy interesante, el autor está actualmente refiriéndose directamente al Hijo, porque está en el caso vocativo.
As the Lord
Como el Señor
of Psalm 102, 25 through 27.
de Salmos,
Psalm 102,
Salmo 102,
25 through 27.
del 25 al 27. Let me repeat that again. En este texto, el Padre se está refiriendo al Hijo como el Señor de Salmos 102, 25 al 27, 25 to 27.
Yes.
Porque está en el caso vocativo en el griego en Hebreos y se está refiriendo directamente a Él. Wow.
And I'll ask you the question, if you read Psalm 102, the chapter, and you get to 25 through 27, who is the Lord that laid the foundations of the earth and the heavens of the work of his hand? What Lord?
Cuando tú lees Salmos 102 del 25 al 27, hace la pregunta, ¿quién es ese Señor que fundó las tierras con sus manos? ¿Quién es ese Señor?
It's Yahweh.
Es Yahweh.
Just read Psalm 102.
Nomás lee Salmo 102. And those are the words that the writer of Hebrews is applying to the Son.
That's what we have. We have God the Father directly addressing Kuriai,
the Son
as the Yahweh of Psalm 102, the unchangeable creator of all things.
Aquí tenemos al Padre dirigiéndose directamente en el caso vocativo a la persona del Hijo y le está aplicando la profecía que se menciona en Salmo 102, que ahí se refiere a Yahweh. Entonces el Hijo es Yahweh, the Son is God.
Which is consistent with John and Paul's presentation of the Son, distinct from the Father as creator.
And it's showing that the Son was there before he created all these things, which is what the context is clearly telling you.
Take the Father's testimony.
That's why he's signing that, to support what he already said in Hebrews 1 through 3. This is what the author, if you follow the discourse, the author's giving you more evidence to support what's already established at the beginning. It's expanding his idea. It's all there. And he's even citing the Old Testament.
And the thing is, Holy Scripture is God inspired. It's theopneustos, God breathed out.
Mm-hmm.
If you're serious about wanting to know the true God, you need to allow the Scriptures to read for itself.
Si ustedes son serios de querer saber qué es lo que dice la Escritura, tienen que dejar el texto hablar por sí mismo, porque está inspirado por Dios. Si ustedes leen Hebreos 1, del 1 al 3, habla de la preexistencia del Hijo. Del verso 6, el verso 8, verso 10, habla del Hijo. Dios se refiere al Padre. El Padre se refiere a Él como Dios. Se refiere al Yahweh de Salmo 102, del Hijo. Y si Él creó todas las cosas, entonces el Hijo estaba presente antes de las cosas que creó, porque Él existía, que eso está de acuerdo con Colosenses 1:17. Él existía antes de todas las cosas, just like Colossians 1:17. He existed before all things. It all harmonizes.
It all harmonizes.
For the Trinitarian, it all harmonizes. Para el Trinitario todo está de acuerdo. Not so for the oneness person.
No, they have massive, and we have to understand it's not an intellectual thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that Ritchie, he's slow or dense. Mm-hmm. It's not that Roger Perkins, he's slow and dense. The fact of the matter is, they all fall under the category of John 8:47. Mm-hmm. Jesus says, "Unless you belong to God, you will not hear the words of God."
Mm-hmm. Dice que no es que estos apologistas sean tontos o que no sean inteligentes, es porque hay algo espiritual aquí que lo está bloqueando, y si no dejan que el Espíritu de Dios los guíe, no van a poder entender esto. Pero ustedes saben, yo sé que I know there's oneness people, like when I spoke to Brother Taylor, there's oneness people who know that they're wrong, but they're afraid to get out, and they have a lot to lose.
Yeah.
Status in a church or whatever, or family. But there's going to come a point where the Spirit's he's going to draw you. He's going to draw you. You need to go with that. Si el Espíritu Santo te está sacando de esa secta, tienes que salir de esa secta. Read the Bible. Just read it the way it's written. It's all right there.
It's all right there. It's simple. I mean, we went into Greek, right? We explicated some of the passages grammatically. But even if you don't do that, allowing the text to read for itself, with Hebrews 1, John 17:5, John 1:3, Colossians 1:16 and 17, the Son is presented as the agent of creation, meaning he was there. He's presented as pre-existing, having dialogue with the Father in some sense, communicable activities, and he's presented as the agent of creation, distinct from the Father, pre-existing. This is the God that we serve. He's triune. The Christ that brings peace, the only means of peace, is Jesus Christ, the second person of the Trinity, and that's the only Jesus of biblical revelation.
Dice que todos los textos soportan lo que estamos diciendo. Colosenses 1:16, Hebreos 1, Juan 1:1, todo lo que estamos explicando se ve muy claro que tenemos que tener al Jesús de la Biblia, no al Jesús de las sectas como de los unicitarios, los testigos de Jehová o lo que sea. And we got to have the right Christ, because if you don't have the right Jesus, there's only one way to get, through the Son. But if you don't have the right Son, you're done.
And we as Christians, if there's Christians watching this, we have to pray for the oneness people, that God does what he did to us, that he does to the oneness Pentecostal.
Dice que tenemos que orar por los unicitarios, también para los cristianos que están escuchando. Tenemos que orar por ellos para que el Señor los salve y los saque como nos ha sacado a nosotros, porque es una cosa espiritual y en verdad tenemos que orar por ellos. Todos ustedes que son guerreros de la oración, les pedimos que oren. I'm asking all the prayer warriors to pray for them, because it's something that they need. Wow, are there any other final comments you want to say about this debate?
No, we probably could go on forever.
Yeah.
No, just that praise God that I feel that I was used to present the gospel, which is the power of God for salvation. And even if you don't have all the answers, never underestimate the power of the gospel to present to oneness Pentecostals, to Mormons, to Muslims, because that is the power for salvation. And I was very delighted to be here.
Amen. And I just pray that the Lord keeps using you. I know there was discussion that maybe we wanted to have a discussion with some people, maybe with Brother Matt Slick.
Yeah.
Little wild guy. But you never know. Maybe we could all get together sometime and have a discussion with oneness folks if they wanted to. I'm always down for it, and I know you are.
Yeah.
So let's see. And it was really a pleasure watching you, and I get a lot of comments from a lot of people that really enjoyed it. The hard thing is in Spanish, to translating it on the spot is very difficult, and sometimes it's very difficult to translate the words, Right. But still, it was a big blessing.
On my website, someone just translated a oneness track.
Okay.
www.christiandefense.org.
Okay.
I think on the search box you can just type in oneness track. I just have to upload it.
Okay.
And we also have a oneness track on the supremacy of Peter in the Roman Catholic Church, their views.
Okay. Maybe we can talk about that in a bit. Dice que en su página de internet, www. Department of Christian Defense?
ChristianDefense.org.
defensacristiana.org, pero está en inglés, christiandefense.org. Si ustedes quieren que les diga cómo se escribe eso, mándenme un correo electrónico a luisreyes440hp@yahoo.com, y después yo les digo cómo se pueden conectar con el hermano Edward Dalcour. Él tiene también documentos y traducciones de sus obras para los que están interesados. All right, now, brother. Any final things you want to say?
That's it.
All right, brother.
Please contact me if you have any questions.
And what's your email?
Just go to the website and contact us.
Okay.
You'll get right to it.
All right. Si se quieren contactar con ellos, nomás vayan para su página de web y usted puede contactar con él. Y si no pueden, se comunican conmigo y yo me puedo contactar con él. Bueno, amigos, God bless you guys. Dios les bendiga y hasta la otra vez.
Thank you very much. God bless.
God bless.